Today, that is 1st February 2021, our finance minister presented the budget to the parliament, and while presenting the budget 21-22, our finance minister said that this is a very challenging task because the financial year 2021 was a contraction, means the year which had negative growth. Okay, so whenever we have a contraction in our GDP, and for the next year when a finance minister present the budget, the finance minister will have lot of problem in relation to raising resources, as well as the government have to spend huge expenditure. So while presenting the budget, one important information our finance minister conveyed was that, okay, so nearly after 4 decades, so no finance minister recently, or you can say that for the last 4 decades, have never faced this problem of presenting the budget while the economy is in recession. Okay, so in 2020 financial year, our economy is in recession. We are having, as per the advanced estimate, the economy will contract by 7.7%. Because of that, in the financial year 2021, we will be having a huge fiscal deficit of 9.5% of GDP. So always remember that in budget, everyone want to know what the government is going to do in the form of the government spending. At the same time, you are supposed to know how the government is going to raise the resources to do that spending. So since the previous year, the government had a shortfall in revenue as well as shortfall in other resources, in the 2021 financial year, the government went for a huge borrowing. That is the reason why we are having, in the year 2021, we are having a fiscal deficit of 9.5% of GDP. So this is, you can see that in the recent years, or you can see the last 4 decades, we never had such a high fiscal deficit. Okay, so be very clear. So this you need to keep in mind. Okay, a budget presented while the economy is in recession or while the economy is in contraction makes that budget one of the most challenging and most important at all. So you can say that this budget is so important because we need to recover the economy. Our economy have to recover, and definitely our economy is in the recovery phase, especially from the 3rd and 4th quarter of the financial year 2021. But from the 21-22 onwards, that is the present budget is for 21-22. How the government spend money, as well as how the government control the expenditure, and how the government raises the revenue becomes so significant. Okay, so our economic activity or the recovery of the economic activity will help the government in attaining or in raising the necessary resources as well as spending the government expenditure. Okay, so this background you need to keep in mind regarding this budget 21-22. Because of that, because of the lockdown and the restrictions imposed had an impact in the financial year 2021, that had an impact in our financial resources, and that is making the government budget of this 21-22 so significant. Okay, so here what you are, from the examination point of view, what you are supposed to know is that, okay, so since the fiscal deficit have gone beyond the government expectation, now in the coming years the government have to control the fiscal deficit. Okay, so many students who are beginners, they will be having a trouble. What is this fiscal deficit is all about? Okay, have an idea. Fiscal deficit in simple term means how much the government is going to borrow in that financial year. So higher fiscal deficit means the government will be borrowing high. So when the government borrow high means for the coming financial year, the interest payment or the interest burden on the government will be high. So this makes our financial management for the government a big challenge. Okay. So this, and obviously what has happened in the 2021, our economy went into fiscal slippage also, because our targeted fiscal deficit and what we attained was different. Okay. So now, so we know that what is fiscal deficit. Okay. The fiscal deficit is nothing but the government borrowing of that particular financial year, and what you need to note down regarding the fiscal deficit is that why the fiscal deficit went so high in the financial year 2021, and in 21-22 also fiscal deficit is quite high. Its reason means when the economy is in recession, okay, the government find it difficult to raise revenue, plus the government expenditure will also be very high. So one of the reasons for higher fiscal deficit is higher government expenditure. Second is lower revenue due to lockdown. Third is the disinvestment target. This is also another important. Disinvestment I'll discuss in another session. Okay, the disinvestment target for the financial year 2021 financial year was 2.1 lakh crore, but what we attained till now is very negligible, somewhere near to 20,000 crore. Now remaining 2 months is there. We will see that how the government is going to manage in it, but the chances are of getting fund in the next 2 months through disinvestment target will be lower. So all these makes the government borrowing at a very high level in the financial year 2021, and that is the reason why we had such a higher borrowing or such high fiscal deficit of 9.5% of GDP. So because of this, there is a chance that UPSC either can ask a question, conceptual question related with what is fiscal deficit, or they can ask why the fiscal deficit was so high in the financial year 2021. Okay, or they can ask the trend in the last few years, what is the trend of, what is the percentage of fiscal deficit to GDP. So these are the questions you can expect from fiscal deficit. There is a high chance that UPSC will ask a question on fiscal deficit. Okay. Now again, some important information I am conveying, because when the finance minister presented budget, she conveyed that okay, this was a challenging year because on the year at which when she is presenting the budget was a year where the economy contracted at 7.7%. So previously we had, as per the government data, as per the economic survey says that from the, as per the data available from 1960-61 onwards, before this 2021, we had 3 contracting years. That economy contracted in those years 1965-66, 71-72 and 79-80. Okay, so after 1979-80, nearly after 4 decades only our economy went into recession, and that too compared to all these 3 years, the contraction of 7.7% is higher. So the highest contraction happened in 2021. That makes our contraction of 2021 a big challenge. Okay. Now certain information what you need to have what you need to connect with fiscal deficit and the budget is that okay. So while calculating the fiscal deficit for the current financial year as well as the coming financial year, the government have used the first advanced estimate of the 2021 financial year. So as per the first advanced estimate, the GDP will contract by 7.7%. GDP will contract by 7.7%. So that will be a negative growth rate of 7.7%. And as per the government figure, okay, see for budget calculation, normally for GDP, we normally calculation we normally uses real GDP, that is GDP calculated at constant prices. But for calculating budget figures like fiscal deficit, we will take into consideration nominal GDP, that is GDP calculated at current prices. So the nominal GDP used for calculating fiscal deficit is for the financial year 2021 is, as per the nominal GDP, the financial year, the absolute value of nominal GDP for 2021 is 194.81 lakh crore. Okay, so if you take into consideration the nominal GDP, the contraction is 4.2%, but real GDP contraction is 7.7%. So in the news we will only hear about real GDP only, but for calculating budget figures we are using nominal GDP. So why this figure is important is, based on this nominal GDP figure only, we calculate the fiscal deficit. When we say the fiscal deficit for 2021 is 9.5% of GDP, it is actually the nominal GDP. Okay, so it will come around, so 9.5% of 194.81 lakh crore will come around 18.5 lakh crore. So for in the financial year 2021, when the economy contracted by 7.7%, our fiscal deficit touched 9.5% of GDP. It means that the government is going to borrow 9.5% of GDP in that financial year. So the government have, in the 2020-21 financial year, the government have borrowed a huge amount, 18.5 lakh crore, in order to ensure to deal with this health as well as this economic challenge, both. Okay, never in history we have faced such a huge contraction and such we for almost for 3 months we could not, no economic activity have happened in India. Okay, so these things you need to keep in mind. Okay, so since the fiscal deficit for 2021 is 9.5% of GDP, in the budget 21-22, the finance minister have made an estimate or target of 6.8% of GDP. So that is another important point. So in the coming financial year, the target for fiscal deficit is 6 point. So from a drastic reduction from 9.5% of GDP to 6.8% of GDP. Now one other important point from the examination point of view you need to keep in mind is that, okay, when in the last budget, when the finance minister presented the budget 2021, the targeted fiscal deficit was 3.5% only. So in the case of 2020-21 financial year, as per the budget estimate of 2021, the target was 3.5%. After that only we had this lockdown and other restrictions. So when the economy will complete, what happened is our fiscal deficit will touch 9.5% of GDP. So in the next financial year, that is in 21-22, the fiscal deficit will be brought down to 6.8% of GDP, nearly 18 lakh crore. The borrowing will come down, because how the government can reduce the borrowing is that as the economy will recover, the government revenue will improve, as well as the government will try to ensure that the disinvestment target in the 21-22 period will be attained. So through better revenue collection, better attaining the disinvestment target, as well as controlling the expenditure, the government will bring down the fiscal deficit to 6.8% of GDP in the coming financial year 21-22. This is the major aim of the financial control the government will be having. Okay, but 6.8% of GDP is still higher. So the budget itself said that by the year the government want to bring down the fiscal deficit to 4.6% of GDP. The government want to bring down the fiscal deficit to 4.6% of GDP by financial year 2025-26. Okay, in the financial year 25-26, the fiscal deficit will be brought down to 4.6% of GDP. Okay, now before this this recession or before this contraction of the economy, so that is the previous financial year. In the previous financial year in 1920, fiscal deficit also. So before the recession or before the contraction, when the economy was in slowdown, okay, so as per the later in 1920, the GDP growth was as per the latest data is 4%. So due to the low GDP growth in 1920 as well as due to lower revenue collection, fiscal deficit in 1920 also was very comparatively higher, 4.6% of GDP. So these are the important Even though it is a data, you need to have an idea how the fiscal deficit in the last few years have moved, okay, and due to lower growth in 1920, fiscal deficit was also comparatively higher. So from 4.6, there have been a big jump to from 4.6. In 1920, fiscal deficit is 4.6% of GDP. In 2021, it will be 9.5% of GDP. In the coming year, the government is estimating the fiscal deficit to be brought down to 6.8% of GDP. Okay, so these are the points you need to note down regarding fiscal deficit. Finance Minister also, see, another information you need to note down is that regarding the total expenditure of the government. Okay, so in the financial year 2021, the update, so as per the revised estimate, okay, the gross expenditure for the financial year 2021 is 34.5 lakh crore. So the total expenditure for the financial year is 2021 is 34.5 lakh crore. It is almost similar for if you compare the total expenditure of 2020-21 and 2021-22, it is almost similar, 34.5 lakh crore and 34.83 lakh crore. Okay, so the expenditure the government will remain the same, because already the current financial year the expenditure is so high. So just for your understanding, as per the budget in the financial year 2020-21 and 2021-22, it's almost similar. Okay, nearly coming around 34.5 lakh crore and 34.8 lakh crore. Now another interesting thing regarding is that out of the total expenditure, capital expenditure is still very minimal. In 2021, the capital expenditure is 4.3 lakh crore. So the remaining is revenue expenditure, which is unproductive expenditure. The productive expenditure is capital expenditure. That is lower in 2021. That is only 4.39 lakh crore. But that have been improved. The capital expenditure have been improved in the budget 21-22 from 4.39 lakh crore. The improvement is 5.5 lakh crore when the total expenditure is almost the same. Okay, so have an idea. This also you need to keep in mind. So if you compare the total expenditure of 1920 to 2021, okay, there have been a huge increase in the total expenditure, gross expenditure of the government of India. Okay, in 1920 the total expenditure is 27 lakh crore, but due to this recession and the lockdown effect, the government increased the total expenditure from 27 lakh crore to 34.5 lakh crore. So what I am suggesting is, okay, so since this information from the examination point of view is very important, rather than looking at the facts, understand the trend. Why there is a greater expenditure on the part of the government of India in the financial year 2021. Okay, why there is what is the reason for higher fiscal deficit or higher government borrowing? We discussed. Okay, it is lower revenue, lower disinvestment target, as well as other higher government expenditure in order to deal with this lockdown and other restrictions, as well as to recover, to ensure the economy recover, the government have to spend more. So these information you keep in mind while noting down this point regarding this budget 21-22. Thank you.